What if I told you that looking someone in the eye and saying the words, "I'm sorry," can actually make it harder for them to forgive you?
It sounds completely backward,
Oh,
doesn't it?
right. I mean, we have been conditioned our entire lives to believe that an apology is just this magic eraser, like a linguistic reset button.
Yeah, get out of jail free card. But behavioral science actually completely shatters that assumption.
It really does, because when you rely on just those two words to repair a relationship, you often, trigger a deeper level of resentment.
It creates this really fascinating paradox because the speaker feels like they've, well, absolved themselves by issuing the apology.
Right, they check the box.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the recipient feels like their actual injury has been completely bypassed,
Yeah.
just so the speaker can have a clear conscience.
So the vocabulary gets there perfectly, but the actual intent is just totally lost in transit.
Totally lost.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today we are tearing apart a framework called authentic communication. It's developed by Francis Flynn at the Stanford Graduate School of Business.
And it is such a critical piece of research.
It is. Our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how to bridge this massive, infuriating gap between what we want to communicate to the people in our lives.
Whether that's, a team of 500 employees or just your partner across the kitchen island.
Right. The gap between what we want to say and what they actually absorb. Because the research shows most of us are relying on tools that simply, well, they just do not work.
We operate under this really flawed premise that communication is just purely verbal or, written.
But it's just exchanging data.
Exactly. We hyper-focus on the syntax of an email or the phrasing in a slide deck or maybe the exact wording of a performance review.
Right, agonizing over the adjectives.
Yeah, but Flynn's work strips all of that away. It exposes a much more foundational mechanism for how we actually connect.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because
Yeah.
what Francis Flynn is pointing out is that before you ever open your mouth or, type a single keystroke, your loudest communication tool is already broadcasting.
It's already on.
And it is your behavior. I mean, communication isn't just sending emails. It's about modeling reality for the people around you.
And that concept, modeling, that's really the bedrock of Flynn's whole framework.
Right.
I mean, we understand intuitively that kids mapped their understanding of the world by watching their parents.
Oh, yeah. It's like a parent telling a kid to eat broccoli while they're literally stuffing their own face with cake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The kid isn't listening to the lecture about vegetables. They're watching the cake.
Uh-huh.
And that fundamental human learning mechanism, it doesn't just shut off when we enter adulthood or the workforce.
We don't outgrow it.
We don't. Adults are constantly scanning their environment. They're observing the behavioral cues of their managers, their peers, their leaders, trying to figure out what is actually valued versus what is just, stated on a poster in the break room.
Right. So if you want your team to adopt a specific norm, let's say extreme ownership, or maybe cross-departmental collaboration, sending a beautifully formatted memo is virtually useless.
It's background noise.
Yeah, you have to physically embody that norm. But Flynn takes it further than just that old, lead by example cliche. He isolates 3 mandatory criteria that have to be present for modeling to actually work.
Right, the 3 pillars.
Yeah,
Good.
it must be authentic, it must be observable, and it must be routine.
And if you miss even one of those pillars, the whole structure just collapses.
So let's look at authenticity first.
Okay, so the behavior has to align with reality and reason. It can't be performative.
Right. People can spot a fake.
Instantly.
Right.
Like if you have a notoriously micromanaging executive, right, and suddenly they adopt this completely hands-off approach because they read some trendy management book on a flight.
The team is not going to be inspired by that.
No, the immediate reaction is deep suspicion. They're thinking, what's the catch? The behavior has to actually make sense contextually and personally. It has to be genuine.
And then it has to actually be seen. Which brings us to the second pillar, observable. This seems, I don't know, incredibly basic, but it is where a lot of really well-intentioned leadership just goes to die.
Oh, completely. Because invisible modeling is just an oxymoron.
Right. I see this constantly with leaders who want to promote, like, a healthy work-life balance. They will shield their team from weekend requests and maybe are working quietly in the background to handle the emergencies themselves.
Thinking they're doing a good thing.
Exactly. They think they're protecting the team. But because the team doesn't physically witness the leader logging off and prioritizing their own life.
The cultural message never lands.
Yeah.
The target audience has to literally witness the behavior. because hidden effort, no matter how noble it might be, it registers as 0 data points in the observer's map.
Wow, 0 data points. It really makes me think of as like a CEO sending out this severe company-wide memo mandating aggressive cost cutting, hiring freezes, budget slashes.
Right, tightening the belt.
Yeah, and then they immediately board a corporate private jet to go attend a conference. The employees aren't internalizing the words in the memo, they are observing the jet.
The jet is the actual message.
Right. The observable action completely overrides the verbal mandate, and it just renders the memo entirely hollow.
That visual of the private jet is the perfect embodiment of a break-in model, because the observable action dictates the actual culture, totally regardless of whatever corporate messaging is going out.
Absolutely. But okay, I want to push back on Flynn's third criterion here, because he says the model behavior has to be routine.
Right. It has to be repeated.
Yeah, he argues it must happen repeatedly to gain traction. And I struggle with this a bit because it feels, I don't know, unnecessarily rigid.
How so?
Well, let's say I want to aggressively communicate to my company that we need to be more innovative. Okay. So I allocate a massive budget, I rent out a convention center, I fly in all these fancy keynote speakers, and I host a 3-day innovation hackathon.
Okay, a huge event.
Right. It is highly observable, it is an authentic investment of resources, and it is a massive signal to the team. Why isn't a grand gesture of that magnitude enough to establish a standard?
Okay, so what's fascinating here is the underlying psychology of how human beings process information and assess risk.
Okay.
We are, at a strictly biological level, pattern recognition machines. We adapt our survival strategies based on the established baselines in our environment, not to the anomalies.
Oh, I see.
Right, so a single massive event like your 3-day hackathon, the brain processes that as an exception to the rule.
Wait, so no matter the scale of the event, no matter how much money I spent on it, the brain just categorizes it as a stunt.
Basically, yes, it registers as a temporary departure from reality.
Wow.
Because think about it. If you host that massive hackathon on Friday, but then on Monday morning, you shoot down 3 new operational ideas because they haven't gone through a 6-week risk assessment process.
Oh, they're going to notice that.
Exactly. The team's pattern recognition software locks right onto the Monday morning behavior. Because the routine behavior is risk aversion. The anomaly was the innovation.
So they revert to the baseline.
They have to. Human beings will always align their behavior with the routine because the routine represents the actual environment they have to survive in every single day.
That makes total sense.
Right, so modeling has to be this sustained drumbeat if you actually want to rewire a culture.
A sustained drumbeat. Okay, so routine modeling is the gold standard for setting the baseline.
Yeah.
But I mean, what happens when that routine inevitably breaks? Because no leader is infallible.
We're all human.
Right. Eventually, our actions are going to contradict our values. We're going to drop the ball, and we are going to harm someone else.
It's guaranteed to happen.
So when your behavior shatters the model, how do you authentically communicate to repair it?
So this is where we enter the art of the apology. And this specific area is where the gap between our assumptions and Flynn's actual behavioral reality is just staggering.
You touched on this at the very beginning, the inadequacy of saying, I'm sorry. Because the research shows that simply issuing an apology does not automatically increase the offended party's willingness to forgive.
Right. We tend to view I'm sorry as this transaction. Like I hand you these words,
Right.
and in exchange, you hand me absolution and a clean slate.
Right, we're even now.
Yeah. But when you mess up in a way that creates actual friction or harm, those 2 words are structurally incapable of carrying the weight of repair.
They're just too flimsy.
Exactly. So Flynn frames the effective apology not as a defensive shield, but as an active 3-part architectural tool for rebuilding reputation and trust.
And these are the 3 A's, right?
Yes. Alacrity, acknowledgement, and amends.
Okay, let's pull those apart, starting with alacrity. The framework demands that the apology must be delivered swiftly and with an eager willingness.
Yes. Eager is the key word there.
And I have to be honest, eager is the absolute last word I would use to describe how I feel when I realize I've messed up.
Oh, it's terrible.
Right. The natural human instinct is to, hide under a desk, mentally justify why it wasn't entirely our fault, and just drag our feet for as long as possible before confronting the person we wronged. Asking someone to be eager to admit fault, it feels like asking them to go against their own survival instincts.
It absolutely contradicts our ego's self-preservation instinct.
Well,
I mean, admitting fault requires a temporary reduction in status, which is deeply uncomfortable.
yeah, nobody wants to do that.
But we have to look at this through the lens of the recipient. When an apology is delayed, or when it feels like it had to be extracted from you like a compromised tooth.
Which we've all felt on the receiving end.
Exactly. That hesitation communicates a secondary message.
It tells them you care more about protecting your own ego than you do about the fact that they are suffering.
Bingo. The delay itself becomes a secondary injury. So, alacrity, stepping into that discomfort swiftly and without defensive caveats, it proves that restoring the relationship is a higher priority than your own pride.
It shifts the dynamic from a forced confession to a voluntary repair.
Exactly. Which is really the only way to successfully set up the second A acknowledgement.
And Flynn is extremely granular about acknowledgement. It's like a two-part lock, and you need both keys to open it.
Yes, both keys are mandatory.
First, you have to explicitly acknowledge the harm the other person experienced, and second, you have to unequivocally acknowledge your specific role in causing it.
And omitting either of those elements immediately turns the apology into a weapon.
A weapon? How so?
Well, if you acknowledge your role but dismiss the harm, saying something like, I know I missed the deadline, but it's not that big of a deal.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you just invalidate their reality.
Exactly. You're telling them their reaction is wrong.
And the inverse is even more common, I think. Acknowledging the harm without owning the role. This is the birthplace of, honestly, what I think is the most toxic phrase in the corporate dictionary.
Let me guess. I'm sorry you feel that way.
Yes, I am sorry you feel that way.
It is the ultimate non-apology.
It really is.
Because it acknowledges an emotional state, right?
Yeah.
But it completely divorces the speaker from any responsibility for triggering it.
It implies that the recipient's emotional fragility is the actual problem, rather than the speaker's actions. Like, I'm sorry you're so sensitive.
Precisely. You must validate the impact, and you must own the action that caused it. Only then can you actually move to the final A, which is amends.
Taking tangible action to make things right. But let's look at the reality of business, or just complex relationships in general. Often, what gets broken cannot be literally repaired.
True.
If I drop the ball and completely ruin a client relationship, or if I boot someone's trust, I can't just buy a replacement part for that.
No, you can't. And Flynn's research addresses that impossibility of perfect restitution. When literal amends cannot be made, the framework requires a reasonable, symbolic form of compensation.
Okay, symbolic.
Right. The function of the amend isn't necessarily to perfectly balance the ledger. It's to demonstrate a proactive material effort to restore equity.
It moves the apology out of the realm of just abstract words and back into the realm of observable behavior.
Exactly, bringing it right back to modeling.
But navigating our own failures is only one half of the equation here. The true test of authentic communication is how we handle the inverse. How do we navigate the conversation when someone else fails, and we are the ones who have to deliver the bad news?
Right. Performance evaluations and critical feedback.
The absolute worst.
It really is this space where almost all authentic communication just breaks down into defensiveness and resentment.
Unless you use Flynn's strategy of front-loading.
Yes.
And the core rule here is brilliantly simple. Before you deliver a single piece of critical feedback, you must explicitly state why you are giving it. You have to give the recipient the rationale for the critique before the critique itself even enters the room.
It really is a masterclass in behavioral psychology and threat mitigation.
I picture it like standing at a bowling alley. Handing someone critical feedback is like throwing a heavy, unpredictable bowling ball down the lane.
Okay, I like this.
If you just hurl it, there is a massive probability it veers straight into the gutter of anger, defensiveness, or complete misinterpretation.
Right, it's out of your control.
Yeah, but front-loading is the act of putting the bumpers up in the lane before you roll the ball. It physically guides the conversation safely to the pins, making it impossible for the interaction to fall into the gutter.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture of human neurobiology, your bumper analogy maps perfectly to how our brains process social threats.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, when an employee sits down for a review and they sense criticism is coming, their amygdala, which is the threat detection center of the brain, it literally hijacks their cognitive processing.
Ah, the fight or flight response.
Exactly. They're suddenly in a defensive survival state. Logic shuts down.
And if you don't explicitly tell them your intent, their brain will just invent one to explain the threat.
The brain abhors a vacuum. In the absence of a stated positive intent, human nature defaults to assuming malevolent intent.
Wow, we just assume the worst.
We do. The recipient's internal monologue just starts spinning. They think, my manager's bringing this up to build a case to fire me. Or, they're threatened by my recent visibility with the executive team.
Or they just simply don't respect my work.
Right.
And if you're listening to this on your commute right now thinking, I don't have the time to front load every single piece of feedback I give, my team should just know I support them.
You are vastly overestimating their ability to read your mind under stress.
Vastly.
Studies around these frameworks often show dramatic drops in defensive responses. We're talking sometimes upwards of 40% drops, simply by framing the conversation first.
You literally disarm the amygdala hijack.
Yes. By starting the conversation with something like, I am going to share some critical observations with you today, and the reason I'm doing this is because I view you as a future leader in this department, and I want to equip you for that role.
Wow, that changes everything.
It neutralizes the perceived threat. They no longer have to guess your motives. The positive frame acts as a lens through which they can process the incoming critique objectively rather than defensively.
But Flynn adds one final, crucial polish to the front-loading technique. Because setting the positive frame is the setup, but the follow-through is just as vital.
Right. You can't just leave him hanging.
Once the feedback is delivered, it must be paired with actionable examples of how to address it.
Because leaving someone with a positively framed but totally abstract criticism is incredibly destabilizing.
Oh, yeah.
Telling someone, I want you to succeed here, but your strategic planning lacks depth, and then just ending the meeting.
That's awful. It leaves them feeling supported but completely helpless.
Exactly. It's just a heavily padded insult at that point.
It really is. You have to offer a clear behavioral path forward, front-loading the intent, delivering the specific critique, and then outlining the actionable steps. It transforms the interaction from an attack into a genuine coaching alliance.
You're no longer pointing out their flaws. You are problem-solving alongside them.
That is such a powerful shift. So, what does this all mean for us? We've stripped communication down to its studs today using Francis Flynn's framework from the Stanford Graduate School of Business.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We did. We began by redefining communication as behavior, utilizing modeling to set the cultural baseline through actions that are authentic, observable, and strictly routine.
And then we examined the inevitable breaks in that routine, replacing that empty phrase, with the active three-part architecture of alacrity, acknowledgement of both harm and role, and material amends.
And finally, we looked at how to protect the integrity of our critical feedback through front-loading, deploying those conversational bumpers to disarm the brain's threat response and transform critique into an actionable alliance.
And the beauty of this is that whether you are managing a global remote workforce or navigating a tense PTA meeting, or just trying to break a cycle of miscommunication with your partner,
these frameworks scale universally.
They really do. They take communication out of the realm of just passive vocabulary and turn it into an active, deliberate system for engineering trust.
It bridges that frustrating gap between what you intend to say and what the world actually hears and emulates. It all comes back to the realization that you can spend hours drafting the perfect script, but the script is just background noise. The real message is the behavior.
Spot on.
So we want to leave you with the final provocative thought to mull over as you step back into your day. If human beings biologically only adapt to the patterns they see,
And they do.
and if your physical actions are undeniably the loudest communication tool you possess, what is your daily routine silently communicating to the people around you right now?
Oof. It forces a complete audit of how you move through the world, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We always love exploring these fascinating frameworks with you, and we cannot wait to unpack the next one. Have a great day, everyone.